Okay, so we're moving on to the book of Judges. So what we can see so far from the lectures that we've already done, going through the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, to Joshua, this is essentially an unbroken narrative. And the book of Judges is picking up right there too. The narrative will be broken in the canon as we move along. Not for a while. Well, Ruth will break it, basically, as it comes after Judges. It's not the same story. If you can think of movies that when they go from scene to scene, that breaks the narrative. If any of you have seen this recent movie that's out, 1917, there's one unique fact about that movie. There's only one scene. The camera action on these two young men does not stop for the entire 2-hour movie. It is a one-scene movie. Now, that is not exactly true for the books we've covered so far, but basically true. And I think you can see that if you want to take it as a narrative, Genesis in the beginning stories, whatever, going on up through the various patriarchs, the flood, getting us to Joseph, getting us to Egypt, Exodus, the people of God being identified as a people, moving out of Egypt together under the leadership of Moses. So this is a story, covers an indefinite amount of time. When was the Garden of Eden? No one has any idea. When did Abraham live? Well, 2000 BC, I don't know. A long time ago. It gets more specific as we get to Moses, we get to the Bronze Age, we get to the actual people leaving. These are real times and places, and we can figure out about when Joshua was, and these people pass on. The book of Judges is going to be from the time the Exodus is over, and we've moved forward to take repossession of the Holy Land. We're across the Jordan River. All the people that came with us out of the land of Egypt are all passed away. They're all gone. Moses is gone, all this. Well, we're going to have a civil society of some sort. People are going to need laws, they're going to need administration, they're going to need ways to do things. This is going to be the book of Judges. And a lot of the book of Judges is the people of God are going to compare themselves to other peoples that they see. There are other civilizations in the area, some really quite a bit more advanced, that have better stuff, more things. It gets attractive to the people. So, the book of Judges is going to bring us a cast of well-known characters. And Israel's going to be back to its regular old problems. Some of the more interesting personages in the book of Judges are going to be Deborah and Barak, Othniel and Ehud. The angel of the Lord is here again. Gideon, Abimelech, Jotham. We meet the Philistines. We're getting some names we heard. Samson and Delilah. These are names we know. And we're going to have a lot of drama here. Most of it's not real inspiring, but that's the book of Judges. It's kind of a crusty historical book about the people of God. They don't yet have a king. The kingship of Saul and David is a ways to come, and it's about a 350-year space of time from we're coming into the land, but we don't have a king yet. We're out here kind of tribing around under the direction of certain judges. Certain judges get brought up in times of need to deal with issues. So, again, an unbroken narrative from the Pentateuch. And the saga goes right on in a continuous manner covering this 350-year period of time from the death of Joshua to the ascension of Saul. And that's getting into real people and places even more that we know and are important to our own Christian heritage. And again, we're sticking with this as the redemptive history of the people of God. A lot of things in the book of Judges you can be seen as what not to do when the people of God get really far astray. There's a lot of things that we can say, maybe that didn't work out for the people of God. Maybe we ought not do it either. All in all, Israel has not really taken complete control of the promised land circumscribed by God. Some of the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin have had some success. Israel doesn't have chariots and cavalry like some of the other tribes in the area. They can do okay in the hill country, but they can't really fight on the plains. They're kind of the hillbillies, is what they are. They're not the most advanced nation out there. And so they're fighting on foot. Well, if you're fighting on foot against horses and chariots in a more modern army, you're not going to do very well. Right out of the gate in the book of Judges, Israel disobeys God again. Israel loves to dabble in other gods whenever the opportunity presents, and this never turns out well. So Joshua dies in chapter 2 of Judges at 110 years old. You can kind of see, too, he doesn't live quite as long as Moses, does he? Moses is 120. As time goes on and men kind of accrue sin, lifespans shorten. You know, some of the great old patriarchs of, the old patriarchs of Genesis, these multi-hundreds of years. And we're getting down to Joshua 110. And we get down to us. Well, what do we live? 80, thereabouts. So, but it makes a point. The key point here is when the people actively or ignorantly fail to keep the covenant of God, they do poorly. That's what we're trying to show here. Israel is sold into slavery for 8 years. Then God raises up the first judge, Othniel. This name could be interpreted as the strength of God. Under him, there was peace for 40 years. What's 40 years? A long time, right? He's Caleb's little brother. Again, Israel sins again, wanders off into idolatry. Eglon, the Moabite, has his way with Israel until God raises up Ehud, the left-handed one. This man truly defiled with severity. He was a pretty tough guy, the way he handled his enemies. Then another one we see that gets raised up as a judge, Shamgar. He kills 600 Philistines with an ox goad. There's a key point here that you want to remember when you look at this. It has some modern analogies. We're going to see Samson whipping a bunch of people with the jawbone of an ass here before long. And Shamgar killing people with an ox goad. Why doesn't he use a sword? Because he doesn't have one. They've been disarmed. They've been in slavery. They don't have any arms. You can think about this with modern martial arts from the Chinese. I always thought it odd. They're fighting with rakes and fans and things of this nature in their martial arts. Why? Not allowed to have weapons. When you de-arm a people, you can control them. I'm not being political here. I'm just saying. He's out fighting with an ox goad. Well, that's what he's got. Israel's sins. Are we seeing a pattern here? Deborah comes along. A woman plays a large role here. She's known as a prophet. She accompanies Barak and the army to a great victory over the Sisera, who had chariots. Right? Chapter 5 is the great Song of Deborah. And it's kind of like a psalm of sorts. So we'll take a look at that. The Song of Deborah. A lot of these things make it to the New Testament too. Chapter 5 of Judges. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, when locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly to bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. To the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured water, the mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased, and travelers kept to the byways. The peasantry prospered in Israel, that grew fat on plunder. Because you arose, Deborah arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. So they're really trying to make the points. And you can say, that this It's an unbroken narrative, but there's things like this in there. It's a song. Obviously, it's a different part of the text. The narrative part of the text stops at chapter 5, and this long song is inserted in there. So they're literary complex pieces. And then, as you get to this, you get to chapter 6. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. So now we're back into the narrative. So there's a lot of the text of the Old Testament and the New Testament, really, that's that way. There's different pieces worked around each other in interesting ways. So we touched on that. So Israel sins again. 7 more years to the Midianites to be punished. Israel cries again to the Lord. They're sorry. The people of God are always sorry, aren't they? Didn't we see that when we closed the book of Joshua? They're all going to uphold the law. They're going to do what they're supposed to do. We got the Pentateuch straightened out. We got proper worship straightened out for a brief period of time. Very brief period of time. But the Lord is always willing to give another chance. The angel of the Lord comes to Gideon, the least of the least. In chapter 6, he says, pardon me. Gideon wants to communicate via the fleece, so they do that. The fleece, let it be dry this way, and then we go back and find it, and that's how God communicates to Gideon, through the fleece. So Gideon has 300, and it's a story of faith. He's trying to see that Gideon can win with a small number of men if they're holy and they stick to the law and the covenant. No Baals, no idols. The people of God love what Gideon has done, and they're really bucking for a king. They're already wanting a king because the other people have kings. Now, it's almost the saddest part in the Bible. We'll get to it, where the Lord God himself says they want a king. I've tried to be their king forever. They won't have it. Well, that's, I think, what happens with us. We want to make our own kings. We want to be king. So, but they have peace for 40 years. Gideon dies and is not even cold when Israel sins again. And it basically prostitutes itself out back to the worship of idols. Abimelech is pretty much a scoundrel and ends up dying by a millstone dropped on his head by a woman. So this is especially bad. You're killed in a unseemly way and by a woman. That's even worse. So chapter 10, we get to chapter 10 of Judges, this whole series of judges who know scarcely anything about the law of God or how to be. And that's kind of a miserable time. We have some real differences of the historical perspective between the Israelites coming out of Egypt and taking the promised land, and then the people that are already there. So Israel's confused. We're getting mixed up with the culture and the things that are the people that are here. We haven't really taken anything over. It's not a good time for Israel. Okay, so here comes Samson. The boy is a Nazirite. Remember, he doesn't cut his hair. Specifically dedicated to God in a unique way. Hair is a big deal with Samson. You can see this even today with the Orthodox Jews. They have unique hairstyles. It's religious in nature, and it means something to them. We used to have it in the church. The religious used to be tonsured, the way the hair was cut. It had some kind of meaning. So I have no idea what the angel of the Lord looks like, but he can be undetected at times, because sometimes the angel of the Lord is speaking and no one knows who it is. But whenever they realize that it's the angel of the Lord, they say, surely I will die. So being in the presence of the holy, it's just got to undo you somehow. So Samson is a rascal. What kind of riddle? Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Right? It has to do with the lion and a bunch of honey and so forth. So a whole bunch of petty arguments ensue, and Samson uses the ass of a jawbone to make asses of the Philistine. About 20,000 of them. Well, I mean, that's the story, you know. I mean, 20,000 people is a lot of people to kill with anything, and to do it with the jawbone of an ass. Um, the story is trying to demonstrate that if God's on your side and with you, you can make asses of other people. You know, you can dominate the situation. Apparently, you don't even need a sword. But you know, Samson has a weakness for pretty women, and this has been the undoing of many people for sure. But you know, it's the story. You know, he goes in and, you know, Delilah, and he won't tell a secret, he won't tell a secret. Well, pretty soon the secret is known. He spills the beans, he gets a haircut, and he gets enslaved. Well, but that hair was part of his Nazarite vow too, part of his vow to God, and you know, and he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing. The story of Micah, it's almost like a little insert in chapter 17. And you can see this narrative is starting to, it's not absolutely continuous. The Song of Deborah certainly changes it. So yeah, we get right here to 17. There was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. He said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and even spoke it in my hearing, that silver is in my possession. I took it, but now I will return it to you." It's an insert in there. It's a story about Micah and his mother and the silver, and it's really not part of the narrative of the book of Judges, but it's in there. And we have to remember, a reminder, in those days, Israel had no king. They state this a lot in the text. It bothers them. So you can see they're writing backwards. This text is authored from some point. You can't write something before it happens. You know, if I'm going to write a history of the state of Texas, well, it'll be what's gone on in Texas from the point of Texas becoming till now. Or I don't write the history of the 23rd century of America right now. I can't. Well, it hasn't happened yet. So obviously it's history. In chapter 19, there's a real downright immorality, and they want to violate the law on a number of grounds. The cutting up of the concubine mentioned there is pretty wild stuff. But the 4,000 men of Israel are outraged by the event. The Benjamites would not turn over the evildoers as they ought to have. They committed murder and rape and were very vile. Benjamin is fairly excluded for a while from the people of God over this whole affair. And then we end the book of Judges. The key thing is what they say, the author tells us. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. That's how we end the book of Judges. Well, now if you think about this, how well are the people of God going to do when every man does as he pleases and they just do what they think is a good idea? It's a real problem. You can see it in churches. You know, a lot of these churches that exist today, I ask, you know, who local church that had an ordination not that long ago, it was a Baptist church. I asked a simple question: who ordained him? No one even knew. A preacher or somebody. But who runs the thing? Who does it answer to? Where's the guide to orthodoxy in this? When this is a low point in Bible history, when the people of God, just each individual, I do what feels good. I do what I want to do. Well, it's not going to work out very good. You're not going to have an ordered civilization. You're not going to be able to take the land. And obviously no one is worshiping God as he wants to be worshiped. We're not remembering the Ten Commandments. We're not carrying out any part of the Mosaic Law. We've probably almost forgotten who Moses even was. So as we go forward, now Ruth, it's just going to be a little bit of goodness. It's just inserted in here. It's not part of the narrative. The period of Judges was the low point of the people of God. And Ruth is going to be a little story of uplifting faithfulness. So in the wisdom of the canon, when we're down right on our knees in Judges, seeing the people of God being gross cutting up a concubine, not following the law, everybody doing as they want, then we get picked up just a little bit with the book of Ruth. The big thing, what's Scripture for in general? To teach the people of God, to inspire the people of God, and to encourage the people of God. That's what it's for. It's not a history book, it's not a science book, it's to teach us, to inspire us, and to get us to move forward as a people. So we'll move on to the book of Ruth next.